Hello grade 9 learners, my name is Tutu Masudubele, and in today's lesson we'll be learning about equations through the distributive law. So we're first going to apply the distributive law in order for us to find equations, to solve for equations. So we're still busy with algebraic equations. And we're still busy with linear equations. Now, still solving for the unknown. And the unknown simply means the variable in the equation. So, let us look at the following equation. Now, notice with the equation that we have 5 bracket of x minus 1 on the left hand side, and we have 4 bracket of x plus 1 on the right hand side of the equation. So what does it require us to do? Well, we have to apply the distributive law in order for us to solve for the equation. And how do you apply the distributive law? Simply multiply the factor, the monomial, with the polynomial that's inside the bracket. So what it means, we're going to have 5 multiplied by x will give us 5x. And 5 multiplied by negative 1 will get us negative 5. So what we are doing, we are distributing the monomial with the binomial by multiplication. We also do that on the right hand side of the equation. So 4 multiplied by x will give us 4x, and 4 multiplied by 1 will give us positive 4. So what we did, we applied the distributive law on both sides of the equation. And now what needs to happen? What needs to happen is that we need to get our variables on one side of the equation and our constants on the other side of the equation. So we need to add by the additive inverse of positive 4 on both sides of the equation, such that our variables are on the left hand side. So we have 5x minus 5 is equal to 4x plus 4 minus 4x. 4x minus 4x will get us 0, so we'll be left with positive 4. And remember what I said, you need to add by the additive inverse on both sides of the equation. Yes, so now what we're going to do is that we're going to add the additive inverse of positive 4x on both sides of the equation, such that we get our variables on one side of the equation. So we'll have 5x minus 5 minus 4x is equal to 4x plus 4 minus 4. X, because the additive inverse of 4x is negative 4x. What then happens? 5x minus 4x will get us positive 1x. So we're left with positive 1x minus 5 as our other term on the left hand side of the equation is equal to 4x minus 4x will get us 0. So we'll be left with what? With positive 4 on the right hand side of the equation. What then do we need to do? Well, in order for us to isolate 4x, we need to add by the additive inverse of negative 5 both sides of the equation. So we'll have x minus 5 plus 5 is equal to 4 plus 5. Negative 5 plus 5 will get us 0. So we'll be left with x is equal to 4 plus 5 will get us 9. So in other words, for the equation to be true, it means the value of x must be positive 9. Because when we substitute positive 9 in the place of x in the original equation, the left-hand side must be equal to the right-hand side. And let us check. If you have 9 in the place of x, we'll have 9 minus 1. And 9 minus 1 will give us positive 8. And 8 multiplied by 5 will get us 40. So it means on the left-hand side of the equation, we have 40 when we substitute the value of x that we found. Let us check what happens on the right-hand side of the equation. Substitute 9 in the place of x. So we'll have 9 plus 1 will get us 10. And 10 multiplied by 4 will get us 40. It means on the right-hand side of the equation, we also have 40. So it means the left-hand side is equal to the right-hand side. And that is the objective of solving for equations, is to get the left-hand side to be equal to the right-hand side. Now let us continue with the next example. we now have 2 minus 2 the bracket of x plus 3 is equal to 2 the bracket of x plus 4. So this is what we have. And the objective of this is to solve for the unknown, and the unknown is the value of x. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to apply the distributive law, because we have a monomial multiplied with a binomial or a polynomial. Can be a binomial, can be a trinomial, or can be more than 3 terms. So what we need to do, we need to first multiply, because remember the order of operations. You cannot subtract before you multiply. Multiplication takes precedence over addition and subtraction. So remember the order of operations, BODMAS. Yeah? So we still have the factor of 2. We still have the term of 2. We then multiply negative 2 with x. Negative 2 times x will give us negative 2x. Negative 2 times positive 3 will get us negative 6. Still apply the distributive law on the right-hand side of the equation. 2 multiplied by x will get us 2x. 2 multiplied by 4 will be positive 8. Then what do we need to do? Well, we need to get variables on one side of the equation and constants on the other side of the equation. And before we do that, we can combine the like terms we see on the left-hand side of the equation. So 2 minus 6 will be negative 4. So we'll have negative 2x minus 4 when we combine the two like terms, the two constants, is equal to 2x plus 8. Now, let's get variables one side, constants on the other side. Additive inverse of positive 2 will be negative 2. So we add negative 2 both sides of the equation. So we'll have negative 2x minus 4 minus 2x is equal to 2x plus 8 minus 2x, as that is the additive inverse of positive 2x. On the left-hand side, the two like terms, so negative 2x minus 2x will be negative 4x. The term of negative 4 is still there. Positive 2x minus 2x will be 0, so we'll be left with positive 8 as the term on the right-hand side of the equation. We then need to get negative 4 on the right-hand side of the equation, and to do that, we add the additive inverse of negative 4, and that is positive 4. So we do that both sides of the equation. Negative 4 plus 4 will be 0, so we'll be left with negative 4x as the term on the left-hand side, and 8 plus 4 will give us 12. To isolate for x, we multiply by the multiplicative inverse of negative 4, and that's the same as dividing by the coefficient of x. So the multiplicative inverse of negative 4 is negative a quarter, so we multiply both sides by negative a quarter, and as I said, that's the same as dividing by the coefficient of x. So we divide both sides by negative 4, which is the same as multiplying by negative a quarter on both sides of the equation. And negative 4x divided by negative 4 will be left with positive 1x. And positive 12 divided by negative 4 will be negative 3. So in order for the equation to be true, it means the value of x must be negative 3. And to test, you can always substitute into the original equation and check if the left-hand side is equal to the right-hand side. Now let's look at the next example. Right, in the next example, we have 4 and m minus 1 plus 2, 2m plus 3 minus 2 is equal to 15 minus m plus 3, the bracket of 3 minus m. So that's the next equation that we are solving. We are solving for the unknown, and the unknown is the value of m. So what do we need to do? Well, first check where you can apply the distributive law if applicable, and apply accordingly. And notice on the left-hand side of the equation, we're going to apply the distributive law for this term, and on the right-hand side of the equation, we're going to apply the distributive law for that term over there. So let's apply the distributive law. We distribute the monomial by multiplication. So 4 multiplied by m will be 4m. 4 multiplied by negative 1 will be negative 4. 2 multiplied by 2m will be 4m. 2 multiplied by 3 will be positive 6. We still have our terms as they are. We then distribute the factor of 3 with 3 minus m. So 3 multiplied by 3 will be positive 9. 3 multiplied by negative m will be negative 3m. So what we've done, we have applied the distributive law where applicable. What we then do, we add our like terms, or we combine our like terms. So notice that 4m and 4m are like terms, so we add the two like terms. 4m plus 4m will give us 8m. Negative 4 plus 6 will give us positive 2. And positive 2 minus 2 will be 0. So in other words, when you add our like terms on the left-hand side of the equation, we are left with 8m is equal to. Now let's check on the right-hand side of the equation. Which like terms do we have? Notice that 15 and positive 9 are like terms. Negative m and negative 3m are also like terms. So we add the like terms accordingly. Negative 1m minus 3m will be negative 4m. So we'll have negative 4m, and 15 plus 9 will give us 24. So we'll have positive 24. So when we add all the like terms on the right-hand side of the equation, we're left with negative 4m plus 24. Now what do we need to do? Get variables one side, constants on the other side. So all we need to do is to add by the additive inverse of negative 4m both sides of the equation. So we have 8m plus 4m is equal to negative 4m plus 24 plus 4m. 8m plus 4m will be 12m. Negative 4m plus 4m will be 0, so we'll be left with positive 24. To isolate for m, we multiply by the multiplicative inverse of 12, and that is a 12th, which is 1 divided by 12. So that's the same as dividing by the coefficient of the variable that is concerned. So the coefficient of m is 12, so we divide both sides by 12, which is the same as multiplying by a 12th. 12m divided by 12 will be positive 1m, and 24 divided by 12 will give us positive 2. And by that we have found the value of m such that the equation will be balanced, such that the left-hand side is equal to the right-hand side. Now let us continue with our equations. So now, we now have 8x bracket of 2x minus 3 minus 4x bracket of 4x minus 1 is equal to 40. So that is the equation that we have over there. So again, apply the distributive law where applicable. So how are we going to apply the distributive law? Well, 8x multiplied by 2x. Now notice that we have two factors multiplied by two factors. So what we then do, we first multiply the numerical coefficients. So 8 multiplied by 2 will give us 16, and x multiplied by x will be x squared. Why is it x squared? Because when we multiply the same powers with the same base, if you multiply powers with the same base, you keep the base and you add the exponents. Exponent of x is 1, exponent of x is 1, hence we have x squared, because we're multiplying powers with the same base. We then multiply 8x with negative 3. 8x multiplied by negative 3 will be negative 24x. That will be negative 24x. We then distribute negative 4x with positive 4x, and that will be negative 16. x squared, and negative 4x multiplied by negative 1 will be positive 4x. And then we still have 40 on the right hand side of the equation. What then do we do? Add the like terms accordingly. So notice that 16x squared and negative 16x squared are like terms, and because negative 16x squared is the additive inverse of positive 16x squared, the two when added will give us 0. Then let's look at negative 24x plus 4x. Well, negative 24x plus 4x will give us negative 20x. So on the left hand side we'll have negative 20x. On the right hand side we still have 40 as our term. To isolate x, we need to multiply by the multiplicative inverse of negative 20, and that will be negative 1/20th. So that's the same as dividing by the coefficient of the variable that's in question. Negative 20 divided by negative 20 is positive 1, so we're left with positive 1x. And positive 40 divided by negative 20 will be negative 2, because when you divide a positive value with a negative value, the answer will be negative. We then move on with the next example. Now for the next example, we have here x plus 4 all squared is equal to x minus 3 all squared. Now notice we have a binomial all squared on the left hand side. We also have a binomial all squared on the right hand side of the equation. Now how do we go about solving for the variable that's in question? Well, because we have this binomial all squared, so the exponent indicates that we are multiplying two identical factors. The exponent of 2 indicates that we have two identical factors. So it simply means we expand x plus 4 so that we have two factors. We still expand x minus 3 such that we have two factors that are identical. Then what do we need to do? Notice that we have a binomial multiplied by a binomial. On the left, same applies on the right hand side of the equation. So we multiply accordingly. So x multiplied by x will give us x squared. X multiplied by positive 4 will give us positive 4x. Positive 4 multiplied by x will give us positive 4x. Positive 4 times positive 4 will be positive 16. So what we did, we distributed the terms of the first factor with each term of the second factor through multiplication. We also do the same here. So x multiplied by x will give us x squared. X multiplied by negative 3 will give us negative 3x. Negative 3 multiplied by x will be negative 3x. Negative 3 multiplied by negative 3 will be positive 9. So you also applied the distributive law by multiplying the binomial with the binomial on the right hand side. We then look out for like terms and we add accordingly. On the left hand side, 4x and 4x are like terms, so if you combine them, 4x plus 4x will give us 8x. So we have x squared plus 8x plus 16. Because remember, like terms are terms that have the same variable with the same exponent. So these two are like terms because they contain the same variable and the same exponent because the exponent of base x is 1. However, x squared is not the like term of the two terms because even though the variables are the same, however, the exponent is not the same. Therefore, x squared is not the like term of positive 4x. We then do the same on the right hand side of the equation. Negative 3x and negative 3x are like terms. So we have x squared minus 6x plus 9 as our value. Now what do we need to do? Well, get your variables on one side and get your constants on the other side of the equation. So what we need to do, we need to add by the additive inverse of x squared, both sides of the equation, and the additive inverse of negative 6x on both sides of the equation. What's the additive inverse of positive x squared? That will be negative x squared. What's the additive inverse of negative 6x. That will be positive 6x. So we're going to do that on both sides of the equation. So we'll have x squared plus 8x plus 16 minus x squared plus 6x, because those are the additive inverses of the two terms, plus 16, or 16 has already been written on the left hand side of the equation, will be equal to x squared minus 6x plus 9 minus x squared plus 6x. If you notice, these two terms that have been added on both sides of the equation are the additive inverses of x squared and negative 6x. When we do that, x squared minus x squared, we then combine the like terms. So x squared minus x squared will give us 0. 8x plus 6x, 8 plus 6 will give us 14. So we'll have 14x, because the two are like terms. So we'll have here 14x plus the constant of 16, which is still on the left hand side of the equation, is equal to, let's check on the right hand side of the equation. X squared and negative x squared are like terms, so the 2 will give us 0. Negative 6x and positive 6x are like terms, so when we add the 2 we'll get 0, so we'll be left with what? With positive 9 on the right hand side of the equation. Get your constants on one side of the equation as well. Notice that we have positive 16 on the left and we have 9 on the right hand side. So let's get the constants on one side of the equation and variables on the other side. So it means we add by the additive inverse of 16 both sides. So we have 14x plus 16 minus 16 is equal to 9 minus 16. Because the additive inverse of 16 is negative 16. 16 minus 16 will give us 0. So we'll be left with 14x. And 9 minus 16 will be negative. 9 minus 16 will give us negative 7. So that will be negative 7 as our value. And then what do we need to do? We need to multiply by the multiplicative inverse of the coefficient of x, and that is 14. The multiplicative inverse of 14 is 114. So that's the same as dividing by 14 on both sides of the equation. 14 divided by 14 will be 1, so we'll be left with 1x. And negative 7 divided by 14 will be negative a half. So it means the value of x will be negative a half in order for the equation to be true. So with that, it brings us to the end of part 2 of equations, applying the distributive law, and I hope you enjoyed the lesson. Thank you.